Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. It started with the silence, the kind that speaks louder than arguments. The kind that fills a room like fog, making it harder to breathe, to see each other clearly, to remember how things used to be. I sat on his lap like I had 100 times before, but this time, it felt different. Not just because of the weight of everything unsaid, but because when his fingers slowly slid into my hair, I felt something shift, something deeper, scarier. His name is David. My husband. The man who once wrote me letters with trembling hands and held my gaze like I was the only thing keeping him alive. And yet, now, he barely looks at me the same. But that night, that night, I saw a version of him I thought I'd lost. Or maybe, a version I never really knew. We'd had a long dinner, mostly quiet. I wore the soft beige sweater he always said made me look like a warm dream. I hadn't worn it in months, but something in me needed to feel chosen again. After clearing the plates, I surprised myself by sitting on his lap like I used to when we were new, reckless, and wild with love. I thought he'd move away, make an excuse, pretend he was tired. But he didn't. His arms wrapped around my waist, steady, firm, familiar. And then, he reached up, running his fingers gently through my hair, slow at first, like he was remembering how. My body softened against him, but my heart? My heart twisted. Because in that moment, I realized I wasn't the only one holding on to a memory. See, David has a secret. One I haven't been able to prove, but I feel it in the way he sometimes checks his phone at night with a clenched jaw. In the way he smiles a little too fast when I ask him where he's been. We're not fighting. That's the problem. We're drifting. Quietly. Without warning. And when he held me that night, when his fingers tangled in my hair and he pressed a kiss to my temple, I could almost believe him again. Almost. But then he whispered something. Soft. Broken. It didn't sound like my name. My heart stopped. I pulled back just enough to look him in the eyes. And he blinked, hard, like he hadn't meant to say anything at all. Who is she, David? I asked, barely above a whisper. He didn't answer. He just closed his eyes. The room felt heavier after I asked him. David's silence stretched between us like a drawn wire, humming with tension. His fingers slowly left my hair, resting instead on the curve of my back. I could feel his breath, slow and steady, against my shoulder, but he still wouldn't look at me. That said more than words ever could. I didn't mean anything by it, he finally murmured, but his voice cracked around the edges. He used to hold me with purpose, with urgency. We'd stay up for hours, talking about the places we'd visit, the children we might have, what our future would feel like. But now, his touch felt rehearsed. Gentle, yes. Familiar, yes. But it lacked that spark, that ache. And yet, it still made me want to believe. I leaned my forehead against his, just like I used to on rainy nights when we'd slow dance barefoot in the kitchen. For a second, it felt like he was coming back to me. His hands gripped my waist tighter, his breath hitched like he remembered too. But then, his phone lit up on the table behind us. Just a soft glow. But enough. He pulled away slightly. Just enough for me to feel the shift. You can tell me, David, I whispered, voice barely steady. I'm not asking to catch you. I just need to know what we're fighting for. His eyes finally met mine. They were tired. Beautiful. Worn. There was love there, maybe even guilt, but also something else. Something locked away. We sat like that for a long moment, neither of us speaking. Just breathing. Existing in the space where love used to live out loud. I never wanted this distance, I added quietly, my hand sliding over his chest. But I feel like I'm chasing a version of us that doesn't exist anymore. David didn't answer. But his eyes glistened, and I knew he wanted to. He just didn't know how. And maybe, that's what hurt the most. Later that night, the quiet between us thickened into something almost unbreathable. I watched David from the hallway, just beyond the soft pool of lamplight. He stood at the window with his back to me, hands tucked into the pockets of his worn jeans. His shoulders rose and fell slowly, as if carrying a weight neither of us could name. I wanted to go to him, wrap my arms around him from behind, rest my cheek against his back like I used to. But something held me still. The phone had buzzed again when he went to the bathroom. Once. Twice. A third time. I didn't touch it. I didn't have to. The name L had flashed across the screen, each notification like a tiny crack in the glass of whatever we were still pretending to be. L. Not someone I knew. Not a colleague. Not someone he'd ever mentioned. But the familiarity in that single name, it wasn't casual. After a moment, he turned and saw me there, half hidden in the hallway's shadow. Couldn't sleep, he asked, his voice low, careful. Not really. I walked into the room slowly, the distance between us both literal and something else. I stood a few feet away, arms folded. He looked at me like he wanted to say something, but didn't. His eyes dipped to the floor, then back to mine. Do you think we're still good? He asked suddenly. The question landed like a stone in my chest. I think we're holding on, I said softly. But I don't know if we're holding each other. A pause. A breath. He stepped closer and gently touched my arm. His hand was warm, familiar. It lingered for a second longer than it needed to. I've made mistakes, he admitted, and for a second, I thought he was going to confess everything. But then, his voice changed. I've been distant, I know. Work's been heavy. I haven't been present. Work. Always work. Always just enough truth to cover the lie. I nodded slowly, but the ache behind my ribs didn't ease. A week ago, I found a bracelet tucked into the glove box of his car. Delicate. Gold. Still in the box. Not mine. I hadn't said anything. Not yet. That night, he reached for me in bed. His arms found my waist like muscle memory. I let him. I let my body remember what it felt like to be wanted, even if I wasn't sure he wanted me, or just the comfort of what we used to be. But as I lay there, his breath warm against my neck, I couldn't stop wondering if he was imagining someone else. And if I was, too. The next evening, the storm outside mirrored the one unraveling between us. Rain tapped restlessly against the windows while David and I sat at the kitchen table, the air thick with things neither of us could say. A single candle flickered between us, casting shadows that danced on his face, softening his jaw, deepening the tiredness in his eyes. He reached across the table, his hand brushing against mine. It wasn't bold, just a touch. But in that instant, it felt like everything we hadn't said came rushing to the surface. My heart thudded painfully, torn between the memory of his love and the ache of what we'd become. Do you remember the night we got caught in the rain on our honeymoon? He asked quietly, his voice almost trembling. We didn't have umbrellas. We just ran, laughing. You looked at me like I was everything. I nodded slowly, the memory flickering in my mind like an old film reel. I wasn't pretending, I whispered. His eyes welled up, just enough to glisten, never fall. Neither was I. For a moment, the tension shattered. I reached for him, hands shaking, and he stood, pulling me into a tight embrace. Our bodies pressed together in the dim light, his fingers in my hair again, mine gripping the back of his shirt like I was afraid to let go. And maybe I was. I miss you, I breathed into his chest. I'm still here, he whispered. But it didn't sound like a promise, it sounded like a plea. Our kiss came suddenly, quietly desperate. It wasn't wild or furious. It was tender, hesitant, two people trying to find their way back through the wreckage of what once felt unshakable. But behind the warmth of his lips, I could still feel the question burning: is this real? Or are we pretending because we're afraid of letting go? As we held each other, swaying in silence, my eyes drifted to the phone on the counter again. It lit up. "Elle, are you okay? I miss you." I closed my eyes. The moment cracked. And everything beautiful in it began to unravel. The air between us shattered when I saw the message. I didn't move. Didn't speak. Just slowly pulled away from David's embrace, and he let his hands fall from my waist with hesitation, confusion flickering in his eyes. He hadn't seen it yet. Or maybe, he had. Maybe he always knew this moment was coming. "What is it?" he asked, already knowing. I pointed toward the phone. "You have a message." He turned, stiffened as he read the screen. "Elle." A beat passed. "She's just a friend," he said too quickly. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because behind the rage beginning to rise in my chest, something colder curled around my heart: disappointment. "You miss her?" I asked softly, not as an accusation, but as a wound laid bare. He rubbed the back of his neck, like the gesture could erase the tension. "It's not what you think. I've been talking to her because I needed someone to." He stopped himself. "To what?" I pushed. "To say the things you stopped saying to me." He didn't respond. He didn't have to. That silence was the second betrayal. I took a step back, the flickering candlelight catching the shine of my tears. And that's when another knock came at the door, soft, hesitant. We both froze. It was late. Too late for visitors. David moved instinctively, heading toward the door. I followed slowly, heart pounding in a rhythm that didn't feel like mine. When he opened it, I caught only a silhouette at first, rain-drenched and small. A woman. She looked up, startled to see me behind him. "David," her voice was breathless. Familiar. It was her. Elle. I should have screamed. Demanded answers. But all I did was stare. Because there was something in her face, not guilt, not boldness, but sadness. Deep, rooted sadness. "I didn't know she was still here," Elle whispered, barely looking at me. Her eyes were locked on him. "You told me you'd talk to her. That it was over." The world tilted slightly. And that's when I realized something worse than betrayal had happened. He hadn't just drifted. He'd tried to replace me. But Elle wasn't what I expected. She wasn't seductive, smug, or malicious. She looked broken. Like someone who'd fallen in love with a man who'd promised her too much. A man who had run from one heartache only to cause another. David opened his mouth, but no words came. And suddenly, I wasn't sure who I felt more sorry for. Him. Her. Or myself. The silence between the three of us was deafening. Rain dripped from Elle's coat onto the floor, each drop echoing like a countdown. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear myself think. David took a shaky breath. "Elle, you shouldn't have come." She flinched, the hurt immediate and raw. "You called me this morning." My eyes snapped to him. His gaze flicked between us like a man drowning, reaching for whichever hand might save him. "She means something to me," he finally said, voice trembling. "But I still love you." He looked at me then, full of desperation. "You're my home." I just lost my way. That word, home, hit me harder than anything. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run. But I stood still, anchored by the weight of everything he wasn't saying. "I gave you everything," I whispered. "And you let her think I was gone." "I didn't mean to," he started. "No," I cut him off. You didn't mean to be honest. That's the problem. Elle stepped back, shaking her head. You told me she knew. That it was already over. David's face crumbled. I thought it would be. I didn't know how to fix us. I got scared. That's when I realized David wasn't a villain. He was a coward. A man so afraid of losing love, he fractured it across two hearts instead of facing what was breaking. I turned to Elle, breath shaking. You didn't deserve this either. She looked at me then, for the first time really, and nodded. A silent understanding passed between us. We had both loved a man who didn't know how to love us back without conditions. And then, I said it. I'm leaving. David's mouth opened, but the words didn't come fast enough. I didn't need to hear them. As I grabbed my coat, Elle took a slow step toward the door too. But just before I stepped out, she turned to me. Can I call you sometime? She asked softly. Just to talk. I paused. Then nodded. Not for him. For us. For the healing we both needed, however unexpected the path. 3 months later, the house feels different. Not empty, just quieter. Calmer. As if the walls themselves are breathing again after holding too much. I moved into a small apartment on the other side of the city. Nothing extravagant, white walls, plants I try not to forget, a soft gray couch where I now read before bed instead of waiting for someone to come home. It's not the life I imagined when I said I do. But it's honest. And for the first time in a long time, it's mine. David tried calling. A few times. His messages started out desperate, then quieted into regret. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Some goodbyes are not a door slam, they're the slow sound of someone walking away. Elle and I met for coffee once. It was awkward at first, two women sitting across from each other, tethered by a man who told us different versions of the same story. But as we talked, I saw myself in her. The version of me that once believed love meant staying through anything. We didn't become best friends. But we became honest with each other. And sometimes, that's even more powerful. Love isn't always romantic. Sometimes it's the courage to start over. Sometimes it's letting go before resentment becomes the loudest voice in the room. I've learned that betrayal doesn't always come with shouting or slammed doors. Sometimes it's in the quiet neglect. The missed glances. The way someone stops choosing you, day after day. But healing comes in moments. The first morning I woke up without reaching for him in my sleep. The first laugh I didn't feel guilty about. The first time I caught my own reflection and didn't see someone broken, but someone whole. And now, I know this, loyalty without truth is a performance. And love without presence is just memory. To anyone watching who's been in love, lost it, or is trying to rebuild, know this, you're allowed to choose yourself. That doesn't make you selfish. That makes you free.